Alright everyone, it was actually interesting. ABC News got it right for once. I know that they're sort of like the fifth wheel of the lamestream media, but it was still kind of funny. They have an article, link in the description, archived of course, talking about the concept that there's been, sort of a problem where Sanders and Clinton, they don't really do stuff together. Their respective camps don't really get along with one another. I wonder why. I wonder whose fault this is. It must be Russia, right? That's the big go-to for them. This perfectly sums up, though, the problem with the Democratic Party of today, which is it's not like the Republicans, where 99% of the people in the party either like Trump or at least tolerate Trump, and then there are a few never-Trumpers who have little fan bases who don't want to play with the other kids. It's not like that. It's more like about a quarter of the party is represented by a new left, a progressive front that's growing, by the way, in size. It's far younger. It certainly encapsulates more of the younger Democrats than the oldest Democrats. It's a rising force within the party as the old power declines. That there is a large core of such people versus a very diametrically opposed, in some cases, larger but dying off group, which were representing the old in the 80s and 90s liberal paradigm, maybe the post-Reagan paradigm, as they tried to transfer out of Mondaleism towards the Clintonian side of politicking, which at the time was very new. Neoliberalism being generally embraced for fiscal reasons. They they defeated the Reaganites by becoming more like Reaganites fiscally speaking, in the corporatist sense. Now that ideology, though, while larger than progressivism, is now dying. And the problem is that these two groups within the party will never like the same candidate. In order to win an election, you need people to be energized. You need them to be, you need them to be excited to vote. Not simply, hey, I'm voting for this candidate because the other person is, I don't like them. Or, hey, maybe I'll go vote, but, maybe I'll have the sniffles, or maybe I'll just watch something else. Maybe I'll just sit at home and watch the election results because, I can't really be bothered to walk fucking 5 blocks to go vote. And there are a lot of people who are like this unless you have a very energizing candidate. Now, the Republicans had this with Trump. The vast majority of them were excited to vote. I think that there's still a fairly substantial number in 2020 that'll be the same. The Democrats, meanwhile, would have monumental difficulty mobilizing the party. Here's the problem. You've got this paradigm shift going on, a disunified party with two main fronts. You can choose the centrist neoliberal style candidate. They may or may not even get the core of the party excited, but they probably don't get excited the youth vote. They probably don't get the far left vote excited. The problem being those groups tend to be more likely to go out and actually canvass a neighborhood for you. They don't have a lot of money. They don't even vote at the same level. It's lower than older individuals. But the Republicans already have the advantage with those older voters. They tend to be more conservative anyway. Conservative as it applies to Trump being slightly different than it might apply to a Jeb or a John McCain. Therein lies the problem, though. The younger voters are more active. They're also more tech literate. If you're running against an opponent like Trump who's going to run a Twitter campaign, basically, a very streamlined, very decentralized system where it relies on a lot of social media influence, not Russia, but, regular individuals like myself, not living in Moscow per se, then you need somebody who can definitely counterbalance that by having a very youthful, activistic left. You have to give them a candidate that they're willing to actually make a meme for, so to speak. I don't see the Democratic Party as likely to do this. The problem is that these two groups won't work well together. You can get the Rust Belt, the Union Democrats back aboard the party with the right candidate fiscally. That candidate will almost certainly not be palatable to the new left. You can get a progressive candidate who will alienate more of those people. The Democrats for a generation will lose control of the Great Lakes region. Either way, the demographics are fairly clear. The shift is in favor of the right wing at the moment. At least the right wing, as it embraces Trump's style of populism, forsaking certain wedge issues that don't do them a justice anymore. Making gay marriage a major platform would be a mistake for the Republicans. At this point, the ACA is a lost cause. They shouldn't even bother to talk about it. So far, they're managing to hold off. Unless you're going to give Rand the power to just design whatever the hell he wants and try to implement it, don't bother. Nobody else would have the, it's obvious, the McConnellites failed, the Ryanites failed, the Trumpites failed. Okay, well, 3 strikes and you're out, let it go. You're winning on tax reform. Jobs are looking good, wages are looking good, stock market's looking fine. Yeah, all those things align to be a really, really good platform for the midterms. And then that goes forth into 2020 for the Republicans, looking very much up. If the economy doesn't tank, if it continues to grow at a decent clip, yeah, Trump will win re-election. Absolutely he will. It'll be all about the money. Especially if he implements any major foreign policy decision that actually seems to work. Now, the media, of course, will breathe down his neck and say, if it works, they'll credit somebody else. If it doesn't work, all blame is his. It's sort of the way that the media works, regardless of the administration, though, and it doesn't usually actually stop them. The voting base will be energized regardless. But the Democrats have a problem whereby, at most, they can get 60 or 70% of their party excited for the election. And that would be, the absolute number being higher. The actual number of people within that group who have greater fervor in voting is probably lower. Whereas if you go with the actual far left, that quarter or third of the party, they're much more fanatic about it, much more likely, I think, if they are excited to actually Pokemon go to the polls, the problem being that the absolute number is smaller. Either way, somebody gets alienated. I think that it's impossible for the Democrats, at least in the midterms, to unify their party. Well, that doesn't give them very much time. If they don't do well in the midterms, that money problem is going to keep up. The party will continue to be disunified and demoralized, which means it's less likely to form a stable platform. Who exactly is going to be the candidate? We have to wait and see that, too. We can't, all bets are off about 2020 until we know who's actually running against Trump in the final result. The thing is, the Democrats have very little reason to be optimistic right now, and they're still eating this pie-in-the-sky bullcrap about how they're magically going to win everything because Trump is less popular than Obama was at the same point in his term. If you operate from that mentality, he's going to crush you. Because you already tried that in 2016. You can give them all the warnings that you want. It doesn't seem any of them are willing to listen. And ABC, meanwhile, ABC News is like, oh yeah, well, here's Clinton and here's Sanders. They don't really talk to each other. Yeah, that's a microcosm of the entire party's issue. The Clinton neoliberals screwed the Bernie Sanders progressives, despite the fact that a significant number of them were very, very energized to vote for Sanders. Now, long term, I don't think Sanders would have won anyway. I've disagreed with certain progressive commentators on this. No, I don't think he would have prevailed against Trump. But if it had at least been a fair situation, it would have been better than, oh yeah, by the way, here's an email showing people, hey, Bernie Sanders got totally shafted. Meanwhile, we hear, and this was the funny part, we hear that Bernie Sanders was actually favored as a primary candidate by those 13 Russians that bought all the Facebook ads, that didn't affect anyone's actual vote. It had no measurable impact on the election whatsoever. But that became a major issue. The Clinton Democrats have tried to excuse the loss of neoliberalism, which is going to continue to lose, trust me. They've tried to explain it by blaming everything other than their own pitiful ideology that no longer gets anyone within the Democratic Party excited. The Republicans didn't make that mistake. Ultimately, it boiled down to Trump laid it out for the world to see. Oh yeah, here's boring Jeb. There's dolt Ted Cruz. Ultimately, he was saying the same thing. Hey, these people are boring. They have boring ideologies. Do you actually think they can energize the voting base? Of course not. Yeah, Jeb's really going to get people whipped up into a frenzy. Yeah, to vote against him. Yeah, he would cause any marginal libertarians within the party to flee immediately. The libertarian platform would have done really, really well if it had been Jeb versus Clinton. Because it would have looked so dynastic at that point, they'd be like, well, what are we even doing as a country? Libertarian Party probably would have gotten 20% in a lot of states if that had happened. Another a little aside for them, for third party loyalty, it would have been better if it was Jeb versus Clinton. Yeah, you'd have a Clinton or a Bush in the White House again, who would probably fail and be a one-term disaster. But third party memberships certainly grow, especially when that person again becomes a failure. It'd be kind of hard to make the excuse, oh well, you should have voted for the other dynastic old candidate that represents 90s era politics. Now, I don't think that would have worked too well. That's about all.